I'm Christa Ryan, and I am your host today for Recovery from Religion, where we come to learn to live in the acceptance of our losses and look for the hope and healing to become whole again. Folks, today we have a really great show for you. I feel like Ed Sullivan here, but I have a wonderful guest who was so nice to come in and come out of her busy schedule. And her name is Juliet, and she is an author and a musician who has not only written a book, but produced right now 2 CDs. And I guess from what I gathered, you're on your way to writing another book?
Yes, it's going to be the second half of what this book was. It goes into the spiritual principles and what's happened in my life. What's happened in my life since I wrote the first book.
All right.
So,
I'm still getting over what happened to you in your first book. And I do want to I do have a whole bunch of questions, Julie, but I want to spend a little bit of time because as a writer, we do these things and we're not really so sure of what the impact is going to be with people. And I know that's one of the reasons why I wrote my book, was because I knew there are many people out there that had gone through what I did, hadn't really processed it, weren't in recovery, still debate, I guess you call it the codependent crazies, where we're left in our minds of, was it real, was it not real, is it me, was it them? But I know that for the most part, when I read your book, there was such a powerful thread that went through, where the one thing that I loved, well, there was a lot of things that I loved that you did in your book, but one of the things that I loved was you talked about the emotion, and then you talked about the behavior that came out after the emotion. Because a lot of times we'll feel things, but then we're not able to be objective as to what our behavior is. And I feel like so much of the new buzzword that you're hearing is codependency, codependency, codependency. Are you codependent? And I have to say, I don't really know anybody who's not yet.
I know, I agree.
Right?
I agree.
And so my whole experience with what I experienced with reading your book was how much it just resonated in my own life as a child, and then getting older, and then of course the wonderful aspect of what happened when we go into recovery over this. Because it gets to a point where it completely not only damages us, but it damages our ability to have effective relationships. And so that was one of the gearing factors that got me into my recovery on codependency, was because I'm a newly married woman. I'm on a whole new level with my children because they're now adults. I'm no longer their mommy, and I'm no longer doing, and so it's like, this ain't working. And I want it to work. So what's the common denominator through all of these problems? Me.
Right, exactly.
So, Julie, why don't you tell us a little bit about what prompted you, what inspired you? I always want to know what inspires people to write a book.
Well, originally this book was my Fearless Moral Inventory from my recovery program, and I knew I just needed to, in an inventory, a person, just like a store owner would have to take, how many cans of peas do I have, how many cans of peas do I need? A person who's going through recovery needs to look at their life and see what's, just like you said, what's working and what's not. And it came out of, in my work as, defects of character, what character behavior patterns have manifested themselves in my life that I probably needed when I was little to survive.
Right.
But now they're, running rampant and they don't work anymore. And so I thought, I want to just get this inventory out and just write what it was like, what happened, and how I reacted to it, and how I became as a person as a result. So that's why I did, and I did it really to get it out of me. I needed to get it out of me and on paper, which is, still to this day, journaling is a huge part of my program. I journal every morning. Yes.
Yeah.
Because you can't just leave it in there, because the feelings brew, and do nasty things. So I thought I want to get that out on paper, and I want to get all my recovery stuff in one place. So I wrote down about the 12 steps and how they help me and what they are, and other recovery processes that I've gone in with my therapist about the observer and the reactor and different processes I talk about in the book about, if I'm obsessed or panicked about something, which I've done over ridiculous things like getting a treadmill delivered and it was in the rain and I couldn't lift it out and everything else, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, there's a whole set of processes that I put in there of what to get out of a panic, okay? And one of the things is you talk about what's going on in my body, feelings, and brain, okay? And that immediately helps me separate myself from my emotion, and I can see how the emotion's going crazy, and then I can look at it and say what to do about it. So I did it to get it out of myself, to get it in one place where I could access it. And then I thought, maybe this would help somebody. Maybe there's another person out there that that feels alone, that feels like they're defective, something's wrong with them. And I thought, if I can just help one person realize that they're not alone, that there's nothing wrong with them, that there's people out there, then it could make a difference. So, and I tried to make the book so that this comes from my experience, whether I'm talking about my therapy stuff or 12-step or God. This is what works for me. And it might not work for somebody else, but it certainly worked for me. So I thought I would put it out there, and I found a way to intermingle my lyrics in there because...
Yeah, I loved that, because it's like a whole nother level. It's like, and this is what I'm learning also as a writer. It's one thing to write about it, it's another thing to sing about it, but then it's another thing to draw about, and it's like all of these things tap into different aspects of where we're coming in our release for our healing. And so to see and hear and watch how you intermingle the lyrics with, it seemed like when you would get to a level of understanding or a level of recognition or a level of awareness, boom, all of a sudden you would go into some of the lyrics, and it was almost like it was an arrival point. And that, when you would, and the other thing I really liked is how you worked through each relationship. You started always with our mother, and then your father, and then your sister, and then your friends, because as people, we have other people who make a huge impact in our lives.
Yes, we do.
And so if, it's like the old expression, if it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck, then it must be a duck, right? So here is the thread that you wove, is what does the codependency look like when you're dealing with your mother, because they're all different entities.
Yes.
And so, but as you were working through them, it would you would break out into these lyrics, which were just, to me, it just brought it to another level.
Thank you. Well, my songwriting, as I said, is a really huge part of my recovery. And I write my songs and I get it out of me, and then I try and find a way to make more interesting ways to say things, so it's not, just like, oh, you're a terrible mother, let's go on for 12 years about that. No, it is just using metaphor and making it interesting. And it's funny because a lot of the songs came before the book, but then they came to fit together. And then in some ways, some of my songs were written years before whatever happened, and then it's like my life made the song come true, and that was a little creepy.
So in reality, you started playing or reaching out in your healing through your music.
Yes.
And then you started reaching back into writing about it in order, probably, it would look to me like you were starting to weave the picture together.
Yes. Definitely.
Because it's one thing to express ourselves through our artistic flair, but then it's another thing when we put the pen to the mind, to the heart, to the paper, that it takes on a whole nother level.
Yes. I mean, there were several instances when I really knew I needed to get to recovery, and one turning point that happened in my life that I talk about in the book, and if you haven't read that part, stop me because I don't want to ruin it. But anyway, I went through a really painful divorce about God, could it be 11 years ago now? And I remember standing at the sink, and my husband and I weren't getting along, and I stood there and I said, you know, I need something to make the pain go away. And I immediately thought of my mother standing next to the sink, drunk, and she obviously was using, you know, a lot of people, places, things, and substances to make the pain go away. And I thought maybe that's why I had to watch her go through that, was so, you know, that I can make a different choice. And it's very sad to think that she had to live that to show that to me. But I knew right then, as painful as it was, because I, you know, of course, just adored my husband. He was just my knight in shining armor, and the whole fairy tale thing, I just bought it, hook, line, and sinker, you know?
We all do.
Okay, I'm not the only one.
No.
But I knew right then that if this is how things were going to be, then I couldn't live like that, and I had to get out, and that was the difference. That's the first time that I chose myself throughout my family of origin, and throughout my marriage. And the second turning point was the next disastrous relationship that I got into after my marriage, which was way too quick after that. But I was, you know, chose someone that was just like my father, because I guess that's a lot of what people do.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was kind of controlling and manipulative, but I didn't see those things. But I just remember lying there, and all of my codependency patterns were just making havoc of, you know, fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, you know, looking outside of myself for worth. So and plus this was like a double hitter. So I thought, if I fail in this relationship, then I'm a failure as a person, because look, I failed at that one too. And I remember lying in bed and just thinking, you know, maybe I just won't wake up tomorrow. And that scared me, because I've never been suicidal, but I thought, you know, this is just too much pain. And so I knew that I had to get into a recovery program, and I needed to start looking at this stuff. And I started digging in really deep, and the results are what you see in the book and the next book.
It's interesting, because I feel like so much of my life has been coming to understand what I needed, you know, self-preservation. And what did that look like? Because we all grow up in these dysfunctional families, and we all take on these different roles. And it's like you were saying, we have survival mechanisms. It's called holdover survival patterns that worked for us as children. And they worked until they stopped working. And then comes the level of, and I always like to say, is that the circumstance changed, the man changed, and the environment changed, but the feelings are all still the same.
Right.
So what's the common denominator? Me.
Right.
And so for me, my real painful experience was that it came down to that my codependency was just raging with my ex-husband. And it kept me in a very abusive relationship for 24 years, because there was no ability for self-preservation. And I mean, one of the biggest things that, I literally walk around with this list, but that we compromise our own values and integrity to avoid rejection or anger, but we are extremely loyal, remaining in harmful situations too long.
And how many people do you know that describes me,
a lot.
you?
A lot.
Yeah.
And especially mothers. I mean, unfortunately, it seems like we take on the banner of codependent, and then comes the mother, and then all of a sudden throw in being the wife and the sibling, and then we just get stuck. And but what I wanted to go back to is that, and I know that when we start working through our issues, the memory recall on how we're able to go back in time, revisit these memories that obviously, what I read in your book, had to be extremely painful. And from that, it gives us the ability, sometimes or not, to be objective. But that's where I feel that the program comes in, or a therapist comes in, or somebody who's there that can help us walk through this, you know, with a more objective ability than what we saw as children.
Yes, definitely. I think, I think some people that are in 12-step look at the therapist as a dirty word. I don't know, I heard that somewhere, but I have a therapist that has just been so invaluable to me for that reason, because she helps me see things objectively. And that's the thing about this book, is it's not just like, let's just go on a blame train fest and just, you know, sit in that stew, because there are situations where that does happen to people, where they never get over the next step. Okay, well, what is my part in that? How can I fix that? And I did look in that, and I also have, you know, in my recovery program, there's someone that helps me see both sides of the street, you know, so not just blame my father for yelling at me for being fat, which just, I've taken me years to overcome, but, you know, realizing my thing that, you know, well, where was I? I was doing the best I could. I was a people pleaser. I was a peacemaker. I mean, above all, you didn't want Dad to yell.
Yeah, I have to tell you, that really resonated with me, you know, because I was the peacekeeper in my family too. And we had, I had this handicapped sister, Minna, who refused to, you know, she would call it out for what it was, and she didn't care the type of ruckus it would, and we would go to great lengths to almost like suffocate her, hold her mouth. Don't, you know what the ramifications are. and we'd all be like, shut up. But the difference now that I've learned from being the peacekeeper is how to be the peacemaker. And the peacemaker is somebody that I've only learned how to become through the program, because we know how to set boundaries, definitive boundaries, but more than anything, we know how to hold them. And that, I think, has been my biggest growth, because there's self-preservation in there, there's self-worth in there, there is self-acknowledgement in there. But I've also heard, because I'm in so many other programs, is that when it's good for you, it's good for everyone else. I mean, what a concept.
Yes, I totally agree. I've become more compassionate, empathetic, loving, understanding, and actually less selfish, because selfishness is one defect that I talk about, since I've been in program and learned to take care of myself. And it seems like counterintuitive to me, because, you know, we were talking earlier about, you know, how it's just the whole Christian view of just, you know, you have to give, and friendships can be that way, you know, where it's you're there for me 24/7, even if it's at the cost of yourself. And I think that's not true, but there's a myth out there like that. And as soon as I started realizing I have to take care of myself, and I have to stop and think, how am I feeling? What am I thinking? What do I need to do? I'm more compassionate with other people.
Right. Have I slept?
Right.
Have I rested?
Right.
Have I eaten correctly?
Right.
Right? I mean, all of those things. We call it HALT. Hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. If we're any one of those things,
I like that.
Right? We're not going to... But I think one of the things that really has jumped out at me, because we all know life is a life of service. You know, that's what we're supposed to be doing when we get healthier, because we're supposed to go out and help either. But one of the things that I test positive for is that codependents have poor sense of boundaries. They help others inappropriately when it creates a dependency on the other part of the person rather than moving that person towards independence. They have trouble setting limits for themselves and allow others to invade their boundaries. A codependent sense of self-worth is tied up with helping others. Christianity says that a person has worth simply because he is a human being that God created. One's self-worth is separate from the work one does or the service one renders. And I know a lot of times I talk a lot about this on my show, is that we are called to love others as we love ourselves. But if we don't know how to love ourselves, how are we even able to go out there and love others?
The world needs to hear that like a billion times over. It's just so true. You know, if I become to the point where I am getting into resentment over doing something, some kind of service, and I'm grouchy about it or whatever, then, or coming out of a place of fear, then that's not a choice. And I'm learning that. And it's funny that you would mention boundaries, because I'm working really hard on my boundaries right now. And I hit bumps in the road. I've had relationships end. It's painful, but it's like, at what point do I start to matter? You know?
Yeah, it's important. And I think here comes the big aspect for myself, because codependents have difficulty living balanced lives. They do for others at the neglect of their own well-being and health. But Christian faith calls for balanced living and taking care of oneself. Codependent helping is joyless. That's how you know Christian service should and does bring joy. Codependents are driven by their inner compulsions. Christian.
They could put my picture right there.
Christians are God-directed and can be free from compulsiveness, knowing that God brings the ultimate results.
Amen.
Right?
Amen.
Because I think so much of what's really going on, and I don't want to, I do and I don't want to make this a conversation about what ends up happening with a lot of Christians who get out there and they think, oh, I'll just get out there and serve because that's what I'm called to do, thinking that that's how they're going to earn their way into heaven. And it's like, no, God gives us grace. It's unmerited. We can't earn it.
Exactly.
And so they
Exactly.
get into this whole thing because it stems from codependency.
Yes,
I've
it
got to
does.
be better. I've got to be perfect. I've got to overcompensate. I have to be hypervigilant, because they're not aware of the emotions and the behaviors
Yes.
that are driving their train.
Every time my pastor or my worship leader or whatever says jump, I have to say how high, even if I'm tired, even if I'm whatever. And yes, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. So it becomes, I think, an awareness of where we need to understand where our priorities are with not only ourselves, but where we are, with our recovery.
Yes.
Right? Because recovery screams you have to take care of yourself. The world screams you need to take care of the world.
Which means we have to work our programs. I have to work my program. I do my step work every week, just like I have to practice my instruments.
Right.
Just sit down, pick up the pencil. It's like I tell my music students, the hardest thing is going over and picking up the instrument. Once you do that, you'll be fine. But, I have to keep working it, because otherwise, you figure I've spent, however many years, 50 years building in these habits.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
going to take just as long to get out of them. But if I'm not working it, you're absolutely right. But if I sit down and do my step work and realize, yes, have I taken care of myself? Have I eaten? Have I slept? Working until whatever hour of the night isn't going to make me a happier person tomorrow, or the people around me. Stop. Workaholism is another thing I struggle with, and
it
perfectionism.
actually saved me. I mean, my
Really?
workaholism really saved me, because the other choice was drinking myself to death. But is because my workaholism was so fueled, and my sponsor and I know I'm still battling it, because it's that self-worth, proving, wanting to get
Yes.
things done, feeling lost in the accomplishment of watching something proactively happening. It gives us a sheer sense of absolute, I believe, it fuels my compulsivity, of feeling that I'm really accomplishing something. And so where does that come from? Proving myself, having to sit with, a mother. I'm at that stage right now. I'm going back to my inner child at 7 years, and it was always about proving. Okay, so I got a B. I have all A's, but I got a B. And then you can't do anything until you have straight A's. Can't do anything till you straight A's. Give me a break.
My mother said the same thing to me. Oh my gosh, absolutely.
Right, and so our parents lived their lives through us, and
Yes.
they drove us to where they never accomplished, knowing that we may be able to, and so it was that whole expectation level
Yes.
of where they thought we should go because of their failures.
Yes.
With no regard to us and our needs and who we were as children. I definitely got that out of your book.
But see, as children, we don't know that, so we think I have to be perfect, something's wrong with me, and like, you know, thus the title of the book, Everything is My Fault, because I thought if I was perfect, my mother wouldn't drink, my father wouldn't fool around, he wouldn't have gotten disbarred, I mean, all these things that happened, and exactly, you know, I am what I accomplish, and I still battle that. But it's better, at least I'm aware of it. It's like tiny baby steps, you know, I'm aware of it, there's that thing again. I don't have to give it any energy. It doesn't mean I'm not going to work hard.
Right.
But you know, if it's 12:30 and I'm still working on something, it may be time to turn it off and stop, you know.
Right. One of the great things about my new marriage is that my husband has really taught me how to have fun.
Oh, that's great.
I know, and it was like, he would like, let's go fly a kite, and I'm like, what? You know.
Oh, and he really meant it.
Oh yeah.
See?
You know, and it was like, what? You know, we have to do this, and he'd be like, ah. And you know, so much of what I was never able to do, especially in my adulthood, is to stop what I was doing and go out and do something frivolous or just for fun. You know, just to have a good time.
Yeah, I'm bad at that.
Right.
I need to work on that more.
So I always say he's teaching me how to be a bum. and you know, because as a child, because I was so, and I got so much of the hypervigilance that you talked about in your book, on living on that edge. You know, it was in between post-traumatic stress disorder and the hypervigilance of thinking that everything and anything that you did was so important.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, absolutely.
As opposed to just being a child.
Right.
What was a child doing at the ages that we were when we were scraping our parents up off the floor, or trying to figure out how to make peace in the family because mommy and daddy were doing, you know, it's like our childhood became a representation in our minds of what was necessary to keep the family dynamics going on the dysfunctional level of what we were.
Yes, absolutely. That's funny because I always wonder, what was it like to just be a kid? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who knows?
One of the scenes I'm working through, I'm finally getting around to writing the film script, and it was like at 7 years old, I was out playing hopscotch with all the kids. But I couldn't even do that because we heard this huge crash inside the house. Mom had overdosed with Valium and alcohol and got up, crashed into the nightstand, and fell on the floor. At 7 years old, I'm scraping my mother up off the floor.
Oh my gosh.
So where is the continuity of knowing what I'm supposed to be doing as a child when it's in the the background thinking of like, what the hell's going on? What the heck's going on in that house?
Right.
Right?
Right.
And I also just so glommed onto the uncomfortability when you left the house and you were able to go out and work in another environment at college, but that preoccupation of what was going on.
Why is she not answering the phone?
Right, or something happened. You know, they
Right.
always say it's always waiting for the other shoe to drop, which we had in your childhood too. You had so many shoes that got dropped.
Right.
Right?
That's a lyric in one of my songs, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we spent our lives waiting for that other shoe to drop. So childhood play was no longer an aspect that we could be present for.
Right.
Because we had this subconscious level of like, what is going on?
Who should I be picking up off the floor? Who should I be taking care of? I shouldn't be having fun because I have to be home saving my mother from my dad. Yes, absolutely.
Right.
I completely agree.
And so then comes the understanding of then what I really love that you started going into, but not even knowing it until you got into recovery, was this thing we call and we laugh about is the codependent crazies.
Oh, just chasing my tail over something, and the hamster's on the wheel, and I'm obsessed about something or whatever it is. I remember a few years ago, a kid lost a violin, and I couldn't find it. But it's just, you it's scary, and you've probably been there too, because you're your own worst enemy, because it's your own head, and it's like, how do you get out of that? You know, you just keep going and going and going, and okay, just think about something else. You know, my therapist would say you have to think about something else. I don't have to think about that, but it's just, oh, it's so difficult, you know, and you're so glad when you wake up and it's over, and you think, I don't have to think about that, it's not my responsibility. And one thing I can say about it is that through working this program, the Code of Crazies have become, usually they're shorter periods of time than they used to be. So that's an evidence of recovery, is I'm not, you know, it's not like a couple of days or whatever, it's a shorter period of time.
As opposed to probably years.
Oh yeah.
And then days.
Yep.
And now you've gotten it down to probably
hours,
maybe minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the recognition. And so the reality of it is that our impulse and our compulsivity is what drives the codependent crazies.
Right.
Wanting to fix, needing to fix, hoping we can fix.
Yes.
You know, and therein lies the aspect of not recognizing that what is the solution there. And sometimes the solution is just not thinking about it.
Right.
Or handing it over, or, you know, letting go. And is it, and this is the thing that I wanted to talk to you about, is in our inventory, when we start realizing in our inventory what and what we're not responsible for.
Yes, I'm responsible for my behavior, but I'm not responsible for someone else's behavior or someone else's well-being, unless I was a mother, which I'm not. But yeah, and I had a bad experience with a boy when I was a teenager, and part of my inventory was realizing the mistakes I made with that boy, and that wasn't an easy thing to admit. You know, don't say yes to someone over the phone when you mean no. Say no when you mean no. You know, that was my responsibility. I didn't know how to say no at 14.
That's right. We didn't know how.
You know, you didn't say no to my father. That wasn't in the vocabulary, you know. But I'm responsible, I mean, first and foremost, to do what God wants me to do. I lead a God-directed life. And I have to listen to Him every morning and worship. I have to pray and meditate and just follow His direction. I'm a Christian Quaker, so I read my Bible and that's my number one responsibility. And in a way, it's really helped me to do that because get out of the driver's seat, Juliet. You don't have to fix everything, and that's where you get into control. Like, I want to control every single thing, which being a teacher doesn't always help with that, because you think you have to be in control, but you're not really. But yeah, just dealing with the control issues and making Him responsible for my life, and then asking, you know, I have my higher power, I turn it over to Him, I do my inventory, and He sheds light on the areas I need to work on through the mistakes I make during the day, during the issues that feel uncomfortable, you know. And one thing I just want to go back to quickly was that, you know, we react to things. That's why I put the observer and the reactor in there. As soon as I get out of myself and I stop and look at what I'm doing, and I think, okay, what's going on here? As soon as I can not be my feelings, then I can start dealing with them, you know, and then I can look at, you know, what my responsibilities are, because someone said to me once, you're not your feelings.
Thank God.
Thank God.
Right.
So, yeah, you know, just working it and realizing, and once what my responsibility is to look at my behavior. And I really tried to make that come out in the book and not like a blame fest. This is what I did as a result of my childhood, but this is what happened to me, and this is how I fixed it for myself, and now I've got to deal with my own self and my life, you know, not playing the victim.
Right.
Right.
Which is so comfortable for so many people, because they haven't been able to get to that next step.
Right.
Of realizing what is your part. I
Right.
mean, I hear that all the time. Oh, I'm a victim. You know, and I'm thinking, oh man, you know, you've got to learn how to claim your side of the street.
That's right.
And by doing that, that is a very painful process for a lot of people.
It's very painful. It's not, and you know, it's not a fun fest looking at yourself, but and it's easier to blame someone else.
Well, the old expression, and it's not so old, is blame is a residue of addictive behavior. And what ends so what ends up happening is it becomes easy because in our compulsivity, it's easier to blame people because we don't take any responsibility for what's going on or what we did or what our part is in anything.
Right, exactly.
And the people that you see that are hurting the most are usually those that are still stuck in the victim mentality.
Right, that's true. And
Right.
this is what happened to me, so I'm just going to go down this path.
Right.
Right.
And everybody's screwed me, and they're still screwing me, and I'm just, nobody, it's the pity party. And when we come to stay in that, stay stuck, in one of the programs we talk about, it's called the poor me. Well, pour me a drink, or give me something to eat.
Right.
Or, give me a reason to, it's really a reason that we subconsciously work in our mind so that it's justifiable that we act out.
Right.
That's what ends
Absolutely.
up happening.
Oh, yeah. One of my cures that has helped me from program to get out of the poor me is my gratitude list.
Oh, absolutely.
And I love my gratitude list. I try and read it at least once a week. It's got like 600 items on it. And sometimes there's things that repeated, but it's my list. I don't care. I mean, it's not like, The Shining, where he's writing, Jack is a dull boy, or whatever it was he wrote 800 times. It's, it's 600 different things. But I think, you know what, Juliet, look how good your life is. And it gets me out of that, whatever grumpy victim thing I might be in, And the other thing that really helps me, we were talking about the codependent crazies, and is my God box. And I think, you know what, I go up, I sit at my altar, I worship a little bit, and I put it in a note in the God box, and I forget him. Of course, God's not in the box. God's everywhere, and it's not like I thinking, oh, it's that box. Because sometimes I thought, what's going on with me in this box? But as soon, as soon as I put something in there, it's like, okay, I gave it to God, and now that's a physical thing, And my therapist also had one thing. She said, because unfortunately, my brother-in-law died of brain cancer a year ago, which was so hard to go through because he was like healthy, he was a marathon runner, didn't drink or smoke. I mean, just one of those things where you kind of think, okay, what's up with that? And it's just a horrible, painful experience. But my therapist said, take those problems, because you can't fix it. You can't fix brain cancer. And I talk about that in my new book, but put these problems in a goblet and offer it up to God as an offering. And that's another thing that I do to help me, because I think, okay, you've done something about it, go do something else. Because I've heard people say, if you want to really obsess about something, sit and obsess about it for like 15 minutes, but then cut yourself off. Have you ever done that? I don't know. Some people talk about that. So
yeah, but to me, it seems like the God box is take the action and let go of the results. And the action is that you're letting it go.
Right.
You're making a conscious decision that that you can't fix this, you can't change it, and it's something that you're not really going to it's not worthy of you spending the time to obsess about it. I mean, that brings so much awareness.
Yes.
To even get to that level that there's something that you can't change, you write it out, you give it away, and you can pray, and it just goes off into the atmosphere, into however it gets up to God through the angels. Who knows? I mean, I have a list of questions that I'm going to be asking about prayer and all of these things when I get up there. But
right, exactly.
But it's really about the here and now. It's how are we living our life today? Fully.
Yes, absolutely.
Fully. And so that's the next thing I really wanted to talk to you about is, so what are some of the things that are going to be helpful for a person who really knows they're suffering from codependency and wants to change, that are going to be able to take away from your book?
They're going to see an example of a relationships inventory where I look at my behaviors. Again, it's not about the other person. And that's one thing I want to make clear about the book, is the book really is about me. Mm-hmm. It's not about other people. It's about me and my behaviors, but they'll be able to take away an example of a relationships inventory. Mm-hmm. They'll be able to take away an example of, and I guess I should expand on that, my relationships with my family of origin, romantic relationships, relationships with friends, relationships at school. You know, we were talking about when I was away at college and whatnot. Relationships in the workplace. That definitely my codependency. You know, it's not like it stops when I go to work. It comes back at 5 o'clock. It's everywhere. You know, wouldn't that be nice?
It'd be nice if you could leave it home.
Exactly. And there's a defects of character inventory where I talk about some of my defects in that book. There's a description of the 12 steps. The 12 promises are in there, and then there's recovery tools that I discuss about, you know, like we talked about the observer and the reactor, and how I use my God box, and how I set a place in my house to worship, and how I use songwriting to help me heal. And I think they can take, if nothing else, they can take away the idea that I'm not alone, I'm not defective. Someone else out there has gone through this and has come out the other side a healthier, happier person, you know, with a stronger...
Healing is possible.
Healing is possible.
It takes work,
absolutely.
though. I mean, we all want to wake up one day, snap our fingers, and feel better, but unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah,
we have to work at it. So, but it's, you know, and I think if there's moments that I don't want to do something, or like we were talking about the fix it and, you know, letting go of the code of crazies and everything, there's a lot of the time that I'm not willing to give up my control, so I have to play for the willingness to be willing. You know, God, make me willing to walk away and not call everyone I know to save my brother-in-law from brain cancer, or to get whatever person it is to call me up, or, you know, and I pray for the willingness to be willing. As soon as I admit powerlessness over whatever I'm dealing with, a lot of the obsession goes away, whether it's food or, you know, I can't really say I'm addicted to online shopping, but just as an example.
So one of the things that interested me in having you on the show is that you talk about God a lot in the book and your relationship with him. And I know the other similarity I felt, that you were raised in a Quaker household, but you know, the behavior never matched what you had learned at, you know, at church. And so what ended up happening as you started getting into recovery with your relationship with God? Because basically the show is about recovering from our relationship with God, and how do we draw closer, and what were some of the things that had, you know, impacted our lives that drove us out and away from him, and then pulled us back and continued to put us on a nearer and dearer relationship closer to him.
Well, ever since I was a child, I always felt like I was really close to God. And I don't know who I got it from, because I didn't get it from my parents. I mean, they were Quakers, but they, you know, that just wasn't, I think I guess I would call my household really secular when I was young, but I did get religion from my grandparents.
Your grandmother.
Yeah.
I remember reading about her in the book.
I had one that was a Quaker grandmother and the other one that was Episcopalian. And my Episcopalian grandmother was the one that really originally taught me to pray. And I think my relationship with God got deeper in 1999 when my parents had their accident, and my therapist said, why don't you sit and have worship every day and start journaling? And that's when that really got closer. But as far as 12-step recovery, my relationship with God has just really taken off, because it's not just like on Sunday when I go to Quaker meeting, or, you know, whatever, when I'm at ministry and counselor or whatever it is just, he is always there. And I try and, you know, stay in a constant state of prayer with him as much as possible, like Paul talks about. And 12-step recovery only made that deeper. And I can remember, and I talk about, you know, in the book about, you know, recovering from religion when I was, you know, 15 or 16 or 17 and at private school, and a kid, you know, put me in the corner and told me I was going to hell, and I was crying and I didn't understand. It's like, how many times do I have to be saved? And I make jokes about that, that I won't repeat.
Many times as it takes.
Right, exactly. But, you know, recovery did open up something that my God, it's a God of my own understanding, you know, and I happen to still gravitate towards the Christian God, but it's not like, you know,
fire and brimstone.
Exactly.
Oh,
Old Testament, you're going to burn, you're so damned. But I know that I have that darkness in me. It's obviously, because I do things that I wouldn't like Paul talks about. I say, well, I want to do the right thing, and why don't I? And
you're human.
Right, exactly.
You're human.
But 12-step recovery has made that just really go off the charts for me. And I've never had to come from the agnostic point of view of what do I do if I don't believe in a higher power,
I don't know how people get through it.
I don't know how they do either. And people say, well, you know, make the group your higher power, or make this refrigerator. There's something else out there.
For a codependent, that's pretty dangerous, making the group your higher power, right?
Right. See, that's true, because then you would have to do everything they said. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Juliet,